Hello there everyone. First off, I just wanted to apologise for there not being a video last month. I really have just been bogged down with editing new episodes and filming new episodes, and yeah, just really didn't have the time to sit down and make one of these videos. But I'm back on it this month, and we've got an awful lot to go through. So first off, as you may know, we're currently working on a documentary on Ouija boards. Now, it's a very sort of hotly contested subject, Ouija boards. Some people believe they're extremely powerful and things not to be meddled with. Other people sit completely on the other side of the fence and believe that there's nothing to them. It's sort of the subconscious mind that's making the board move. But they're all things that we'll be looking into in this documentary. However, I was hoping to get some testimonies from people that have used Ouija boards. I know a lot of people out there, have used them in the past, whether it is when they're younger and they were just messing around with them. Some people still use them today, and I know a lot of people I've spoken to have had some very strange experiences whilst using them. And I was hoping to reach out into the community and ask some of our viewers if there is anybody that's had a unusual experience with a Ouija board, if you'd be willing to either record your experience, sort of just a voice recording, or sit in front of a camera and just sort of explain what happened during your experience, just so we can feature it actually in the film. I thought it'd be interesting to sort of get some first person accounts of what happens when using these boards. So if there is anybody that has an experience they would be willing to share, and like I say, it can either be a voice recording if you're not comfortable being on camera, or if you are comfortable being on camera, if you could just sit down and record that. If you drop us a message on any of our social medias, or send us an email, we'll be able to tell you where you can send that footage to, so we can feature it in the film. That would be really, really much appreciated from all of us here. I certainly think it will add another dimension to this film we're working on. Over the last 2 months, we've been very, very busy. I think we've probably filmed about another 5 episodes in the last 2 months, all of which will be set for release next year. We've been to some weird and wonderful places as always. One place that's really stood out to me is a little church in Suffolk, not far from Ipswich, in the very, very small village of Akenham. And the actual place we investigated there is the church, which has been surrounded in myths and legends for quite some time. The most prominent of which being that if you walk around the church 13 times, you're supposed to summon the devil. And there's actually a cracked gravestone in the churchyard, which is where the devil is supposed to emerge from. A lot of people have done this over the years, right from people that have just gone there, no links to the paranormal, but walked around it 13 times just to see if anything would happen. And there has been some other investigators go there as well, paranormal groups that have tried this out. Interestingly, many of them have said they've felt a change in the atmosphere once they've completed their 13th circuit around the church. They said it feels like a heavy pressure emerges in the atmosphere, and yeah, just a sort of they just sense a change. And the idea was that we wanted to see if we could experience that as well, but take it one step further and see if we could document anything that actually changes there environmental wise. So we set up a load of equipment on the cracked gravestone, which is where the devil supposedly comes from. We set up something that will detect any changes in the air pressure. We set up a Geiger counter to monitor for any fluctuations in radiation, EMF meter. I think we set up an ultrasonic sound detector as well. So we set up a load of equipment there just to see if when we complete our 13th loop around the church, if anything would actually happen and change there. So we started walking around the church. Each of us were completely of the idea that we'll reach the 13th circuit around the church. Nothing will happen, nothing will change. And we were all very, very much convinced that this is just sort of an old legend or a bit of folklore. So we've done it anyway. If we don't put these things to the test, you never know. And we can't say it's folklore or not based on any truth unless we've tried it out for ourselves. So we walked around the church, got to about round 10, and we was all sort of saying, only 3 more to go. Nothing really, not feeling anything unusual at the moment. Got back to where we were positioned all the equipment on the gravestone, and James said he could hear the EMF meter going off. I couldn't hear it at the time, and the thing is, we'd actually said we'll start the loop at the porch of the church, because it just seemed like a sensible place to say this is where we'll start. So only James heard this EMF meter going off, and we thought, well, it's on camera anyway. If it has gone off, we'll have caught it. Got round to the front of the church, no changes or anything. And we thought, well, James said the EMF meter went off, so we'll go back to that area. And it was then that we thought, logically, we actually started the circuit around the church where we'd placed that equipment down. We hadn't started it at the porch, so actually the EMF meter went off when we completed 13 loops around the church. Surely enough, reviewed the footage, the EMF meter didn't go off at all. And I think we was probably recording for about half an hour beforehand. No spikes in EMF. As soon as we reached 13 loops around the church, we got extremely high magnetic field readings just out of nowhere. We stayed at the churchyard for a further hour. No spikes, nothing else went off. And it's one of those where it's completely blown my mind and really opened my perception up to ritualistic things. I mean, walking around a church 13 times, it's not a ritual as you'd think of it conventionally, you know, summoning something. But by definition, it is a form of ritual. And it certainly opened me up to thinking, well, yeah, maybe there is something to some of these kinds of things. Certainly, there is the possibility it was just a huge coincidence. But, I mean, what a coincidence that is to, you know, if that is the case. Yeah, I can't see it being a coincidence. Really can't wait to see what else we've caught in that episode. I've not finished editing it yet, so we've still got all the footage to go through. So I'm interested to see if we've caught anything else. But certainly, I thought I wanted to share that with you guys because it's such a bizarre thing. You know, how can walking around something 13 times have an immediate effect on the natural environment? It shouldn't do. It defies all logic. So yeah, probably one of our most prominent experiences as of late, and I really can't wait to share that episode with you. And I think it's certainly one of, probably I'd say, one of the more bizarre things that's ever happened to us since we've been doing Shadow Paranormal, and I can't explain it other than saying it's just coincidence, which to me is sort of a more bizarre than the notion that maybe doing this ritual has stirred up something. So we've investigated a few other places over the last month. We went to a place called the Devil's Bridge last week. Interesting little place. Had a few unusual things happen there. Certainly nothing like the Aikenham Church experience, but yeah, it's been really nice. And the weather's getting a lot nicer now, so it's a lot more enjoyable spending time at outside locations. Which brings me on to my next point of something that I've noticed this year certainly is the cost of hiring buildings and locations to investigate them. When we first started doing this, we used to, you know, contact places. Some of them will let you in for a few £100s. Some of them even less than that. I'm well aware that nothing is free, and I wouldn't expect to be let into a location for free. You know, I'd even say, you know, well, here's X amount of money just for your time and for letting us do it, you know, just as a goodwill gesture. So I know being able to investigate a building, the building's owned by someone, they've got to open it up for you. We expect to pay that. But I've noticed that this year, the amount of places I've contacted, and I've contacted about 30 different places over the last few weeks, that are charging about £600 to investigate a place. Peterborough Museum was one of them I contacted, the Ely Jail, Oliver Cromwell House in Ely, Moyes Hall in Bury St Edmunds. About £600 plus, you know, to investigate there from about 8 o'clock till midnight usually. Huge amount of money, and it's sort of meaning that we can't investigate a lot of places that we'd like to, just because of the cost. And I certainly think that, I mean, the cost of living and cost of everything is going up anyway. My wages aren't, but cost of everything else seems to be going up anyway. So obviously, you'd assume that the cost of hiring a place for an evening would go up as well, but not by the amount it has done. We used to pay a couple £100 to places to let us investigate them, which was absolutely fine by us, you know. You know, let you have it for an evening, 5-6 hours, not a problem. But £600 plus sometimes for some of these locations is extraordinary amount of money. And I just wondered if other groups have found this as well. Certainly we're at a disadvantage where there's only 3 of us, so whenever we tried to hire somewhere, we split the cost 3 ways. And once you start getting to £600, you know, like that's £200 a head to spend a few hours in a place, which obviously we've done it in the past at a couple of locations, but I'm sort of at a point now where I'm not willing to pay that kind of money. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's daylight robbery. My guess is that the amount of sort of public ghost hunter groups, you know, these ones that put on events for the public, you pay, you know, £30 a head or whatever, and you get taken around by a psychic and all of that. I know people that have gone on these, and some of them say they're absolutely great. It's a fantastic experience. From a paranormal investigative point of view, I couldn't disagree more. I think it's absolutely the conditions to investigate with 40 people in a building, literally impossible. A lot of these events are set up to not have stuff happen necessarily, but they'll feed information. They'll have a psychic there that will, you know, or even if it's a member of the public that claims to be a psychic, they'll be saying, "Oh, I'm feeling something here," which feeds into the night. But really, you're collecting no evidence and you're not having any real paranormal experiences. But I wonder, because these things are so popular nowadays, and they're willing to pay sort of the £600 to locations to let them investigate it. That's kind of where the bar's set now. So for a group of 3 people wanting to go and investigate somewhere, it's impossible now. It really is impossible. It's such a shame. But I just wanted to know if other groups had experienced the same thing, or if there are any locations out there that are a little bit cheaper and a bit more accessible to smaller groups that maybe we could investigate as well. Right, so it's time to take a look at some paranormal news. So here we are, the first one from the Express. When was this one dated? 25th of April. The chilling truth about England's most haunted village exposed. An academic has identified the real people who went on to become ghosts, named the Hanging Schoolmaster and Screaming Man. Now, Pluckley Village, I believe this is set in, is allegedly the most haunted village in England. I believe it actually holds a record in the Guinness World Records. It's been greatly contested over the years how many of these ghosts are genuine and how many of them were kind of fabricated in order for this record to be held. Very interesting, certainly looking into like the backstory of some of these ghosts. But yeah, we'll have a look at what this article says, see if it's able to correctly identify some of the real people behind these. An academic has claimed to uncover the truth about England's most haunted village. For more than 70 years, Pluckley in Kent has been known as England's scariest village, with more than a dozen ghosts haunting the area. Dr. Simon Morton, Associate Professor of Creative Economies at Bristol's University of West England, has said that 4 of the most popular ghosts are based on real people. Sarah Sharp, who burnt to death in August of 1911, is known as the Watercress Lady, while Mary Ann Bennett, who killed herself in 1862, is called the Lady of Rose Court. Richard Brigland died in an accident in Pluckley Brickworks and Tileworks Quarry in January of 1899, earning him the moniker the Screaming Man of the clay pit, whilst the Hanging Schoolmaster is Henry Edgar Martin, who killed himself in August of 1919. So I've always found that really fascinating with sort of ghost stories and investigating places. Obviously, we quite often come across stories of the White Lady or the Pink Lady, or, you know, the Grey Lady is a common one sort of around the Suffolk area. I always find it really interesting to think, is there a real person behind this ghost? Is it supposed to be a certain person, or is it, you know, is the ghost its own thing? Is there no kind of living or deceased counterpart to it? Just always really fascinated me, and certainly, obviously, in Pluckley, a lot of these supposed ghosts that haunt places do have a real life counterpart that they're supposed to be a ghost of. Dr. Morton said the way these stories get told and retold can tell us a great deal about how we use the past to understand ourselves and the places we live. Local rumours take on a life of their own, personal tragedies become salacious gossip, and sometimes social prejudices obscure the real lived experiences of the people the stories relate to. Finally, it reminds us there are real people and real places behind these stories, both of which deserve our respect. Dr. Morton pieced together the origins of the village's folklore through extensive archival research and by scouring newspapers, parish records, and birth, marriage and death records. He said, "I've been fascinated by the ghost stories of Pluckley since I was a child. My late father's ancestors came from the village, and the research has been a personal as well as professional journey. Over the course of the research, I've even discovered that one of the alleged ghosts is a distant cousin, Sarah Sharp, the Watercress Lady." The village was given the most haunted title in 1950 and bolsters after a further mention in the 1989 Guinness Book of Records. So yeah, interesting little article there. As I said, Pluckley's an interesting one because it's got so many of these ghosts that have popped up, and a number of them, the general consensus is that they were created merely to, you know, get in the Guinness World Records of there being the most ghosts in this particular village. Certainly a place that we're looking to visit and hopefully investigate in the future. But yeah, I thought I would share that one with you because it was quite interesting to me. Certainly seeing that Dr. Morton has been able to potentially identify some of the real life people that these ghosts are based on. Up next we have an article from the Daily Echo, and this was the 19th of April. Sadness, a smallpox hospital in Gosport to be demolished. A paranormal investigator has reacted with sadness to the news that a former smallpox hospital and paranormal hotspot is being demolished. The site, which also served as Don Styler's physical training centre, has been a popular spot for paranormal investigators over the years. The former hospital is set to be demolished ahead of its purchase by the Ministry of Defence. This comes after guns and drugs were seized at the site. Paranormal investigator Tony Ferguson, who has visited the site several times with his team, said, "This will be such a sad occasion, as many paranormal teams have investigated, experienced and caught many unexplainable things at this site." The site, often referred to as Monk's Walk, has been a hotbed for paranormal activity, with investigators capturing various unexplained phenomena. Mr. Ferguson and his team recently made a final visit to the site, accompanied by fellow investigators, GS exploring with ghosts and exploring the afterlife. So I did actually have a brief look into this place. It's not an especially magnificent looking building. I mean, here you can see it here. It looks sort of like a small hut. Obviously, it's got a huge amount of history behind it. Going back to sort of being a smallpox hospital. I think it's had a number of other uses since then, more recently being a gym, which is kind of where its downfall was, because from what I understand, reading a few other news articles, there'd been loads of sort of money laundering, performance enhancing drugs, cocaine, well, I suppose it is performance enhancing to an extent. There'd been all sorts from there. I think there was guns, as it stated in that article, found as well. So there's a lot of illegal activity going at the gym, and I guess that was probably the last straw of why it's been sold. I think the Ministry of Defence have it now, but they'll be demolishing it. Really sad. Obviously, we've never investigated this place, but I always find it upsetting when there's places that seem to have a lot of paranormal activity, and then they're either renovated and no one can ever sort of gain access in them again to be able to investigate, or ones like this where they're knocked down entirely, and there's no way of ever investigating them again. We've had a few locations like that. The Uplands Hotel being one of them. We investigated there quite a few times in 2017, probably through to about 2018 as well. Had some really interesting experiences and captured some really interesting things there, and unfortunately it's been demolished quite some time ago now. I think maybe six years ago it was knocked down. So it's one of those where it's always plays in the back of my mind of thinking, like, would if we'd have kept going there, would we have got anything else? And I suppose it's the fact you can't get what you want. It makes it even more sort of tantalizing. If would we have experienced anything further there had we carried on investigating? But quite sad. Like I say, when it said smallpox hospital, I was expecting it to be sort of one of these massive, magnificent Victorian buildings, which it isn't. But nevertheless, it's always sad when a place with history is knocked down and gone forever. Then essentially. So this article from the Mirror, 17th of April, I thought was quite an interesting headline on here. "I'm a funeral director, and these are the chilling experiences I've had at work." If there's any profession you'd expect might have come across a ghostly encounter, it would be a funeral director, right? That hasn't strictly been the case, according to one man in the profession. However, social media's Yorkshire funeral director, Jacob Walsh, who is based in Goole, East Riding, Yorkshire, took to TikTok to open up on his experiences with the paranormal at his workplace. "Ghosts, I've seen them. Have I experienced them?" he asked rhetorically in a video. "I've felt a presence, usually in the mortuary, which is completely understandable, as it's where people in my care are resting." So that is an interesting one. I suppose it's the classic place you'd expect to be haunted until you think about it. A funeral home, mortuary, graveyard, all places that have those spooky connotations. You think, oh, there'll be a ghost there. But when you think about it, none of these places are the kind of places logically a ghost would be. If we were assuming they're the soul of the deceased, why would they be haunting a mortuary that they've got no connection with? Other than their body being in there, maybe it's the case they've got a connection to their body still. Graveyard, where they're buried, why would they haunt, their mortal remains if they've gone to sort of the higher plane of existence? It seems sort of a silly place for them to haunt. But it does seem to be sort of a theme that these places are haunted. But when you put any thought into it, they shouldn't be really. I mean, personally, with the churches, I think that it's more so the history of the church. It's a place where people have lived and worshipped for, in many cases, nearly 1,000 years. I wonder if some of these funeral homes and the mortuaries, it's not the fact that the people's mortal remains are in there. It's more the case that the building's incredibly old and has witnessed many things over the years. I wonder if that's really where these hauntings stem from, if that is the case. So he's gone on to say, I have definitely felt people tapping me on the back, he confessed, or just strange things that I can't put my finger on. But as I've always said, don't worry about the dead, it's the living that will hurt you. And I couldn't agree with that sentiment anymore. But why would a spirit tap him on the shoulder? Jacob explained his belief. I think it must mean that it's a reassurance that I'm doing right by them, and that's all that matters. We always talk to the people in my care, we wish them good morning, and every night I say good night to them. He added that even when he's doing personal care such as shaving a deceased gentleman, he tells them what he's doing out of respect. Jacob summarised, so if they're watching over us, that's fine. We just don't know what's in the afterlife, and I'm not here to tell you what I think there is or isn't. Writing in response, another funeral director revealed, I've heard footsteps in our mortuary early hours of the morning, and a second shared, having worked alone in different branches of our funeral homes, I've definitely heard walking upstairs when I'm on my own. Never been scared though. So yeah, the article goes on with a few other experiences that people have had in funeral homes. Again, going back to what I said earlier, I think it may be more so, and I don't know sort of the age or the history or the background of these buildings that these funeral homes are in, but I certainly think if there are any hauntings in these places, it's far more likely that it's linked to the building itself. And even if we go into like strong emotions or prolonged strong emotions create a haunting in a place, funeral home, there are a lot of very strong emotions in there, especially if they're ones where, you know, the families will come and pay their respects. So it could just be a build-up of this over the years that manifests itself in sort of hauntings. But very, very interesting nonetheless. So I thought I'd share some of those stories with you. I thought it was quite an interesting article. And to hear from people that, you know, have a very, very important job. I mean, we like to think today we're sort of far removed from any sort of ritualistic belief systems and, you know, that our ancestors have, but really all this is going right back to that very core human nature that we have to have a respect for the dead, and a respect for the departed, which, you know, these people, these funeral directors and people that work in places like this have a very, very important and sensitive job to do, which really does link back to that core thing of what makes us human. And right from the dawn of time, it has been that level of respect for the dead. Now, to finish up this video, I wanted to share with you an email that was received from one of our long-time viewers, Rick Shaw, who has sent us stories and experiences he's had before, which are featured in some of these videos. But he sent us another one probably about a month or two ago now, and I never got round to picking it up in the last one of these videos. But it was really, really interesting. It actually takes place not far from me, which means I can actually go on site and have a little read through about his experience of what happened and see if I can find any logical explanation for what it may be. I'm currently sat in my car along the stretch of road where I believe this story that Rickshaw shared with us actually took place. Now, I lived in Linton very briefly for about 18 months, so I kind of know the village, and I went to school here as well, so I'm fairly familiar with a lot of places, but this is the first time I've heard any sort of real significant paranormal experience happening here, other than sort of just, you know, the old legends and folklore around the area. But I'm currently parked up along Horseheath Road, and what I'll do is I'll read through the email that Rickshaw actually sent us, and yeah, see what we make of it. So he starts by saying, "Hello Luke, I'm going back quite a way here. My wife and I were living on a relatively new Linton Heights housing estate. We had a dog that I always gave a last walk to around 10 p.m. Upon this occasion I was walking up Horseheath Road towards Wheatshift Way, so he would have been walking that direction, sort of coming up the hill. It was late November and very cold, no wind at all and a thick ground frost. Visibility was excellent as everywhere was lit up by bright moonlight. There was no one else around. Rolling down the hill on the opposite side of the road was what first appeared to be a large ball, which as it got closer I could see was actually transparent. I had a sudden premonition that this thing was going to come across the road to me, and it did. When it was coming towards me I could see it very clearly. It was around 18 inches in diameter and perfectly round. Within its form were many identical objects, all appearing to be the same. At the time I took them to be sticks, but could have been anything, and they were all constantly revolving around each other like a miniature galaxy while staying within the globe. Anyway, this thing hit my legs quite hard.
It felt quite solid but was not painful in any way. It didn't all break up and lay in bits at my feet as may be expected, but rolled off my shins and continued down towards the path in the village. I watched it until it was out of sight. Now when I got home I told the wife what had happened, and I could still feel where it hit my shins. When it was happening, I wasn't looking at the dog who was on the lead at the time, so I don't know what his reaction was, if he showed any at all. In hindsight, I feel I should have gone after the object to see where it was going, but I was in a slight state of shock and disbelief at the time. I have related this story to several people over the years, including a psychic, but no one has any clue as to what it was. Probably some of them think I was either drunk or imagining things, but I know what I saw. Has anyone else had a similar experience, I wonder? So very, very bizarre. And the thing I've found with investigating the paranormal for all these years is that there are many encounters with the unknown, with the supernatural, that are more bizarre than scary. And this certainly fits into that category of bizarre. A ball of, by the sounds of it, almost like a tumbleweed, but not tumbleweed, because it clearly isn't, because you know what you saw. You know, tumbleweeds you're not going to get in a Suffolk village anyway. But say, for example, we were going to get some kind of, I don't know, moss and twigs and stuff somehow collected in a ball and rolled down the hill, you would still be able to identify that and know what that is, especially if it comes right up close to you and actually rolls into your shins. You're not going to, mistake a ball of twigs and moss, are you? It's not going to happen. So very, very interesting. In all honesty, I really don't know what to suggest that could have been. I think it's a very, very bizarre encounter. Very interesting one. I've never heard anything like it before. So I really don't quite know what to say about that. I think certainly you've experienced something unusual. I did have a brief dig around in the area to see if there's any other similar kind of sightings, and really there isn't. So it seems to be the only kind of sighting or event of its type that's certainly been experienced by someone. Really fascinating. Thank you very much for sharing. I wish I could shine some light onto maybe what you experienced, but in all honesty, I can't. Again, there will be using objective opinion. It was late at night. It was moonlit. Could you have mistaken it for something else? Maybe, but, and I would lean on that, and I would say yes, it could well be mistaken identity of something if it was from a distance. But the fact it came right up to you, rolled into your shins, there's no way you can kind of mistake something if it comes up that close and personal. So very, very bizarre. And again, thank you very much for sharing that. Interesting little experience you had here all those years ago.
So there you are. Thank you very much for watching. Hope to be back next month with another one of these videos. And as I said at the start, if anybody's got any Ouija board stories that they'd like to send over to us, be really, really greatly appreciative of that. If you wanted to get in contact with us, as I say, drop us a message on one of the social media accounts or send us an email, and we can tell you how to send that video or audio file over to us. But until then, all the best. Take care.